What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And I could not be more thrilled to be joined for a second season every Friday here on the podcast with the one and only Mike Wahle. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Wahle68. Mike, so great to have you back on the show. So excited to talk Packers. Wish it was after a win, but so excited to have you back this season.
Andy, thanks as always for having me, and certainly looking forward to talking to you all week, or all year. This is a learning experience. The first week is sometimes a learning experience with the Green Bay. It seems like the last couple of years. So I'm sure we'll have better things to talk about in the future. But let's get through this one.
Yeah, for sure. As I think many have alluded to, the Packers' fourth preseason game, it seems to be last year and this year. But I just wanted to get your overarching thoughts, kind of what you took away from this burn the tape sort of game, if you're feeling better, worse, or just kind of how you're feeling in general.
I probably watched this tape 2 or 3 times afterwards, just because we all nerd out on it.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what just stands out more than anything is the Vikings played a lot harder than we did.
They did.
They were first to contact. They had I don't know where John Rennan Jr.'s protocol is right now, where he's at in the concussion protocol, but I know what hit made it happen. Like, they brought the wood. Their DBs were sticking their head in places that I'm not saying that ours were shying away from, but they weren't nearly as reactive to the situation as maybe the Vikings were. They were just super aggressive. They out-physicaled us up front. I didn't think their offensive line was going to be able to handle our defensive line as well as they did. And I'm not saying that our defensive line didn't have some good moments, but I was shocked at the play. I didn't think Derek Sowell was going to be as good as he was against Preston Smith.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to absolutely abuse their right guard. Like, if this was if you were telling me, hey, we have to create a game plan based on our personnel, and I know they have Justin Jefferson, we talk about the back end later, but I would say, they're starting to right guard, and we have 2 guys that could be all pro. I'm going to have one of them on them every single play, and I'm going to force them to double team, or I'm going to mug up my linebackers so the center can't help. Like, I'm going to make that kid pay the entire game. I'm going to find a way to do it. And I feel like we did it a handful of times. It worked. They got home, whether they got the sack or the pressure. But I just don't feel like we did that. We just didn't exploit that matchup enough, and that was certainly part of the frustration.
Yeah, there was some really interesting coaching decisions, I think, as a whole in this game. And like you said, rookie right guard, Garrett Bradbury at center, who they've had a lot of success on in the past. And there's just a lot of 4-man rushes. And I know a part of that's dictated by score and not a lot of 3rd and long situations, which gets you a little bit out of your blitz packages on 3rd and longs and those sort of things. But I just would have liked to have seen a little bit more aggressive approach. Had an opportunity to talk with Aaron Nagler and Ben Fennell about this earlier this week. And we all said the same thing. Like, you just need to dictate a little bit more to the Vikings offense, especially with Kirk Cousins, who doesn't exactly like being off his spot too much, although he responded to some of that pressure very well in this game. But yeah, Ed Ingram, right guard, you would have liked to see them attack him a little bit more. Like you said, either have Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark over him on just about every single snap and just try to exploit that matchup. I thought Kenny had a good game, but I thought Jerron Reed, after a really strong training camp, didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Dean Lowry was okay, ups and downs, kind of per usual. Preston and Gary, more just average, okay, didn't really do too much. Gary had the one big play, but overall, I think that group needed to be a little bit better, and unfortunately, in this game, they just weren't.
Yeah, I know Lowry didn't have the stats. I would have said that he was just based on kind of relative talent. He would have been my player of the game.
I had him graded high as well.
Yeah, like Kenny, this is one of those things where you're a victim of your success. Kenny probably graded out well, but you just didn't. Like, I'm used to him camping out in the backfield of the Minnesota Vikings. Like, I know firsthand from conversations that they are afraid of Kenny Clark, whether you're in Minnesota, whether you're playing at Lambeau. And the Minnesota Vikings, they have a new coach. I think it's Chris Cooper is their new line coach, and Coop has them winning on double teams. They won their double teams, which I know you think in the NFL, of course you should win your double teams. We didn't win in our double teams very often.
No.
Like, there's a lot of teams that don't win on their double teams, and the Minnesota Vikings, through split, through technique, through ferocity, they won on the majority of their double team blocks and kind of kept those guys like Kenny Clark at bay. And like you talked about, like, I don't know if we need to necessarily pressure more, but we certainly need to put people in situations to be successful a little more often, given the personnel they have in front of them. And the other thing that we do, that's just kind of a technical thing, is we put Rashawn and Preston in the same spot in a position all the time, and we fill the safety of the linebacker. And you see a lot of other teams allowing that person to play across the face of the tight end of the tackle and make the plays that they're capable of playing. Now, I'm not saying that's a every down thing, but certainly moving those guys around, like it's certainly easier to scheme if you know that Rashawn and Preston are going to play contain every single play, and they're going to bring the guy, they're going to fill the guy into the B gap, whether it's the safety, whether it's the Mike or Will linebacker. So it's just little things like that to maybe free them up to make some more plays in the run game, make some more plays in the pass game, and opportunities to, again, exploit. Like anytime we win one-on-one, anytime we get one-on-one matchups, we're expected to win one-on-one matchups. And we can talk about some pass rush things a bit later if you want, but it's always just kind of like you get this every time you play like this, you go, well, why didn't we play in the preseason?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I think it felt like to me, and you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, it felt like to me that this defensive game plan asked the players to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And I get this is a talented defense, but I thought it was rather vanilla. They played a lot of base, coverages, cover 3, cover 4. Again, didn't bring a lot of pressure, didn't, move their guys around too much. It was a lot of Preston and, Rashawn on the outside, Kenny, Lowry, exactly where you'd expect them to be, nickel personnel, Razul in the slot, Jair on his side, primarily not moving around a ton. Safeties, like I said, either in cover 4, cover 3. Like it just seemed like a very vanilla plan with just expecting your guys to go out and beat the guys across from you. I thought, like you said, Minnesota did a good job in their matchups. They won their double teams. They won the matchups they were supposed to. They made the plays. They let Justin Jefferson do a lot of the heavy lifting. And for me, it wasn't good enough from a defensive game plan standpoint.
Yeah, it's always tough when you have a lot of talent because it's like Pete Carroll, kind of started this trend 15 years ago now, where if you have a lot of talent, you just bring him, coach up really well. You can play simplistic and you can just win your one-on-one matchups. And then obviously Fangio's come back as kind of a counterpunch to that with, starting with the cover 4 and kind of mixing some things up a little bit. But listen, they played simplistically in the back and they miscommunicated twice on Jefferson touchdowns. It's not like he was doing heavy lifting, but it's not like he had to play very hard. You know what I mean? Sure. It's like I don't think those were what did he have, 184 yards? I don't think those were a difficult 184 yards in his mind. And when we talk about like what matchups do you think we're going to win? Like I would have bet the farm that Rashawn Gary would have beat O'Neal more than a couple times and gotten clean to the pocket, got a hand on. And I was, when you watch the way that he rushes sometimes, and like I think he's an all-pro talent, and I think he's going to have a great year. But we talked about it last year. Like we need to improve the efficiency of rushes sometimes, as far as like every single time you line up, you have to be able to challenge leverage in a way that you're actually going to, given one misstep or false movement by the tackle, you're going to get to the quarterback. And we just don't do that on a consistent basis. There's a lot of defensive line coaches around the league that don't teach that on a consistent basis. They're looking for the strip sack big play, but a guy as powerful as Rashawn, as fast as Rashawn, with hand use and hip movement as good as Rashawn Gary, like he should be challenging against any right tackle in the league, even Tristan Wirfs. He should be challenging the right tackle every single snap. He should be this close to getting the quarterback, 70, 85% of the time.
I feel like, and this happened, I think, with Rashawn a little bit last year too, it feels like usually it takes him a few games to realize that he needs to utilize, like he just needs to bull rush and use his speed to power more. It almost feels like at times he wants to be a speed rusher to begin the season. And then it kind of realizes like, okay, I can't really bend the edge. He's fast. It's not to say he's not, but like, that's not his game. And then all of a sudden when he realizes, oh, I can just go through people, and then everything sort of comes together. And like you said, maybe it's not a lot of those strip sacks, but it's a lot of offensive tackles that are in the quarterback's lap, making things super uncomfortable. And then he gets his pressures and his sacks that way as well. I'm hoping that, he can kind of pick that up sooner rather than later. But yeah, I thought it was a mostly nondescript game from a player that really they needed to be on his A game week 1.
It happened across the board. I don't know if you just chalk it up to just not playing a lot in the preseason. We could, you go to the other side of the ball, and I mean, goodness me, like when you wake up in the morning and you see Bakhtiari's not playing, Jenkins isn't playing, now Lazard's not playing. Royce Newman's got to play right tackle against a guy who's pretty angry at us. Jensen's got to play right guard against the same guy when he comes inside, and he's going to come inside a lot. Like, there's just some of these things where you go, this isn't turning out to look very good. Looking like something that's going to be in our favor. And again, I was shocked on the offensive side of the ball from an offensive line perspective. Not that Zadarius made a bunch of plays, and not that Hunter made plays, because Hunter's got moves that I've never seen. He's like a matrix guy sometimes.
He is.
But I was honestly surprised that 94, I think it's Tomlinson, he
He's
dominated. He completely dominated the game inside. I was shocked that he was able to do that. And I was just, again, like JRJ a couple times got whoppalopped in this game. He's one of my, he's one of my favorite players on this team, but it certainly looked like they were bringing the fight to us.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was overall, there was a lot of good players for the Packers that did not have anywhere close to their best games. Adrian Amos had one of his worst games as a Packer. You had Rodgers, who struggled at times. John Runyon Jr., who I agree, one of my favorite players on the team, he struggled in this game. Rashawn Gary didn't have a great game. And like when you always, even Jair Alexander, I thought at times didn't have his best game either. So you always start adding up some of your best players on the team not having great games. Add it to the fact that you're without Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Alan Lazard, and yeah, you have a pretty good butt kicking in Minnesota pretty quick. I do want to talk about that offensive line because I thought they were atrocious. And again, feel free to correct me if you saw something different. I thought Josh Myers had an okay game. I thought Runyon was up and down. I thought Myers and Hansen on the right side really struggled. Yash, a couple plays here and there, but I thought he struggled as well. But curious what you saw out of the play of the offensive line in this game.
Yeah, first of all, I think playing in Minnesota, I know it's not the old Metrodome, but I think that's just going to be one of the most difficult places for the Green Bay Packers to go and play. First off, I think starting the season there is difficult. Starting the season without your two best linemen is difficult. And we can start going through all the laundry list of reasons why they shouldn't play well right now. But you'll be able to establish something as an offensive lineman, right? And they should have, and I think we averaged over 6 yards a carry, but like it was feast or famine. It wasn't just an efficient day at the office from a running standpoint. And we got punched, we continually got punched in the mouth. Tomlinson, especially, particularly inside number 94, he dominated our double teams. He dominated his single blocks. He was disruptive as far as pushing the pocket and pushing the line of changing the line of scrimmage in the run game. You knew Za'Darius was going to make plays. I think when you look at it on paper, I don't think anybody expects Royce Newman and Henson to have a good game in that scenario. You're just hoping that they don't have terrible games. I was surprised. Myers and JRJ, like Myers played pretty well. I think Yash played. I don't expect these guys to play perfect against the quality opponent that they're playing against. So I thought Yash played pretty well. And JRJ, like you said, I just saw him get physically hit a couple times, and I was kind of shocked because he's usually not that kind of guy. Like, listen, I've been through the bringer that's in that stadium in Detroit. Like sometimes you just get hit hard. Some things happen, but when you're down, when you're not sure about as an offensive lineman, you're sitting in the room, right? And you look and you go, okay, we don't have Alan Lazard, but we don't really sure what our receiving core is going to look like. The only person that we know, for sure in this offense is we have Aaron Rodgers, the best player in the league, and then we have two really good running backs. So from like Mercedes Lewis, I'll include in this, the offensive line's got to be sitting there going like, this is our game. And I don't know if, I know Bakhtiari and Jenkins aren't playing, but this is our game. We have to win this game up front because we're going to have to establish the run. We have to create play action. Like we have to do this stuff because we don't know what we have outside. You could tell early on that Aaron Rodgers was on a clock. Like I remember he had Watkins on a deep drag. He didn't even wait for him. Like he's on the clock. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. Check down. Right. So as the game went on, you could see why he got on the clock because they started getting pressure and sacks. But when you're in that situation, you got to go out there and really, kind of draw a line in the sand, set your jaw and just go for it. And I just don't think from the jump, we did a very good job of showing up with any kind of ferocity in the first 2 quarters.
No, I totally agree. And this was, to some extent, I think, just a perfect storm of terribleness because you had an offensive line that, of course, is without Jenkins, Bakhtiari, and then Runyon goes down mid-game as well. You immediately go down 7-0. So your defense does you no favors. You're immediately playing behind the 8 ball. You immediately have a 75-yard touchdown at your disposal to gain momentum back. And then you drop that. And then all of a sudden you're down double digits. And now you're trying to throw to get back in the game. Again, now rookie Zach Tom comes in his first, game moments, and he's all of a sudden in a situation where they have to pass a ton and are down, double digits in that game. You've got an, incredibly loud crowd in Minnesota. that you did nothing to really quiet them down. You don't have a Devontae Adams cheat code on the outside who can win in 2 seconds or less every single play that Rodgers can just be like, all right, well, I'm looking over there. I know we can't protect, but I can always get it to that guy. You don't have that guy. You don't have an Allen Lazard. And that's not to say that these are all excuses. They had opportunities to play better in this game, keep it more competitive. You catch your pass, you convert on 4th and 1. There are things that Green Bay could have done to make this an incredibly much more competitive game. They didn't execute, but man, there was a lot of perfect storm going against them as well.
I think you said it perfect right there, though. If Watson catches the pass, then we get to the 4th and 1 situation on the goal line, and like Z's not reading our mail and doesn't make that stop, we're probably not having this conversation. And that is actually kind of where this team's at, right? If you can make that first play, you're probably smooth sailing.
Yeah.
But because of the inexperience at that position in particular, because we haven't seen everybody together, because we're missing 2 key guys on the offensive line, I don't know that we can just wipe that one off and move on to the next play. It looked like, from a team standpoint, it took, I don't know, a quarter and a half for them to kind of come back and keep pushing and just you kind of walk around with a little bit of confidence. Not necessarily individuals, but as a unit. It looks like it looked like we kind of sleptwalked through the first quarter after that. And that is a part of the growing process that'll happen over the course of this entire season, right? You need to be able to bounce back from those kind of miscues. And right now, I just don't know whether you're talking about the wide receiver room or you're talking about the offense in general, if they're confident enough in themselves and their abilities, aside from Aaron, to be able to say, hey, man, we can make a couple of mistakes and we're still going to drop 30.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they're certainly at that point yet. And I think it's going to maybe take some guys getting back healthy before they maybe get to that point. Maybe those rookies getting a little bit more established on offense. But I mean, it's tough to win in the NFL when you leave 14 points out on the field off of a drop touchdown and a failed 4th and 1. Those are tough things to overcome. And there have been times where this, an Aaron Rodgers led offense with a full, disposal of weapons can overcome some of that. Just don't think that they're there right now. We could go in a couple directions. I want to come back to the offensive line in just a second because I have a couple other questions there. But I wanted to ask you about that Christian Watson drop since we brought it up already. Have you ever had a sort of viral, I know social media wasn't quite as much of a thing back then, but like sort of a viral mistake moment where, everyone was pointing the finger at you, and B, like how as a player do you respond to a moment like that? And how did you feel like Christian responded to that moment?
So I have so many of those from my 3rd year in the league that I don't know which way you want to go. We'll talk about a win. We beat the Philadelphia Eagles 6-3 one year. And Hugh Douglas was having an all-pro year, and I think he made all-pro. I think he made all-pro against me. He had like 3 sacks. He had like as many pressures as you could talk about. And I just remember my wife was at the YMCA in up off the 41 north of Velp, and I walk in, and me and Flanagan were gonna like go do something in Milwaukee, and I walk in, and my wife like hides the newspaper. She's on like the Stairmaster. I'm like, "What's up?" And she like opens the newspaper up again. I'm on the front page, like this guy sucks kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been there. It's a really listen, when you make mistakes in the league, I think you just have to ask yourself like 2 questions. Like, are you giving focus and are you giving effort? Because it's usually one of those 2 problems. And if you're being honest with yourself, like, I don't think he obviously is not trying to drop the ball. He's trying to do things the right way. You just have to, whether it's reps, whether it's just that moment, you'll be ready for that moment next time. Maybe you didn't have the focus that was required to make that play in that moment. Okay. As long as guys are putting focus and effort in during their preparation, during that time of the week, that's really the only way you overcome this stuff. Like I'm a huge believer in confidence and preparation. I think that's the only confidence that nobody can take from you. So as long as they're putting in focus and effort during their preparation week, you have to just continue to put people in the situation to prove that they can kind of overcome that initial miscue.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I thought overall, I know he didn't get a ton of opportunity to sort of make up for that play, but I thought overall his response in the post-game presser and, basically saying like, hey, that's not going to happen again. I'm going to go out and make that play every single time that it happens, that I get that opportunity. He had the end around. He had a catch late in the game. I think it was like an 8 or 9 yard little out route on the sidelines. But I thought overall he blocked well. He didn't stop giving effort and intensity throughout the course of that game. I think he's going to bounce back just fine. But man, that's a tough, like, imagine the narrative if it's the other way around, right? Like everyone's talking about, Christian Watson, next, huge Green Bay wide receiver, if he goes and catches that 75-yard touchdown, even if he had a nondescript remainder of the game, just first play of his career, he gets a 75-yard touchdown. People are going to talk about that forever. Instead, it goes in the complete opposite direction. And I don't know. For me, the story is always more fun when you make a mistake and overcome it. I think that's exactly what's going to happen with Christian. I think he'll bounce back just fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. He probably lost out on a car deal or two, at least a free meal, by dropping that first one. But maybe there's better things in store here in the next 6 months.
Hopefully that's the case. I know we're certainly all rooting him on, and I think he's going to be just fine. Unfortunately, like, going back to the offensive line for a second, we're at the point now, week 2 into 2022, August or September. What is it going to be, like 20th of 2022? And David Bakhtiari is still not playing following an injury that happened 2 seasons ago, prior to the playoffs. Certainly still a level of concern. I know there's a ton that goes into this. He's had multiple knee surgeries. It's by all accounts not the initial ACL injury that's giving him problems to this point. But how concerned are you about David Bakhtiari? And, where does Green Bay go from here if he is, again, out for an extended period, or if he just can't come back?
As a fellow lineman, I'm concerned for his kind of mental health more than anything. I can't imagine. An ACL used to be a death sentence when you were, back in the day, but now it's not. I don't want to say it's common, but they're kind of a run of the mill injury as far as there's a protocol you're going to follow. There's certain things there's a certain timeline, and for it to happen the way it has, for him to be out this long, to have some expectations, I think, whether it was playing in the last game last season, going into the playoffs, whether it was being able to start this season. It's just got to be extremely frustrating and difficult. That the guy's a true pro. I've never heard anything but great things said about him as far as his preparation and the attitude he takes toward the game. You want him to obviously still keep fighting, but I think realistically, from a Packers perspective, it's time to start kicking the tires on, okay, what is the next left tackle look like? Is it Josh? If it's not, let's go find somebody else. If Bakhtiari can come back, listen, nobody would be happier than I would, because I think he's just so much fun to watch. Right? I'm an offensive lineman. I like watching greatness, and he is greatness. Yeah. But I just don't. It's been so long now. There's enough question marks that you go, man, I don't know what else that other thing is other than the initial surgery. But it just doesn't. Unfortunately, it just doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't, and it's frustrating, as you mentioned. Like, for anyone that's out there that thinks, and I've seen a bunch of it on social media, that he is not trying his hardest, or that he is not doing everything in his power to get back.
Absolutely absurd.
It's beyond absurd. And there are a few players over my time, just watching the team and covering the team, that obviously there's been a lot of phenomenal Green Bay Packers in games, right? But there have been a handful of players that during practices that my eyes cannot go off of them because of how they prepare day in and day out. Devontae Adams was one of those players. Jair Alexander, one of those players. And David Bakhtiari, by far and away, one of those players. His intensity, his focus, his effort, his everything. It is not a mistake that he was one of the best left tackles in the league for a long time because of the way that he goes about it in practice. For anyone that thinks that this guy is not one of the hardest workers on the team, that he is not one of the most dedicated professionals in the league, like, you do not get that level of technique and master that level of technique at left tackle by just being lazy. It's not just natural talent.
Yeah.
I didn't come out looking like, Trent Williams or Larry Allen, or just like he's had to work to get to the point that he is. So to think all of a sudden he just stopped and doesn't care about this and isn't giving his all is just, like you said, beyond absurd. I'm almost cheering for him more to come back to prove the haters and doubters wrong than I even care about, and obviously for his mental well-being and his wellness as well. Even more than just being a great Green Bay Packer anymore. But man, it's just so frustrating and such a bummer all the way around for an all-time great offensive player for Green Bay.
Well, listen, first of all, I could promise you that he doesn't care what the people on Twitter are saying about him.
Agreed.
Because he's too busy trying to get back to normal. When you watch a guy like David Bakhtiari, I just want to say this for the casual fan, like, he doesn't do, like, his pass sets are not what you would call traditional. His stance is not traditional. right? And he is not. He's a good athlete. He is not a great. He's not an all-time like a Trent Williams, like Larry Allen, like you described. He's not an all-time athlete. So the level of work and focus and detail and preparation that he had to put into getting that unique stance, that unique first and second kick, all the way that he settles, his hand placement, like he is so good and unique at each one of those things. That alone should shine a huge light on the kind of work that he's had to put in over the course of his career to get to the top and the consistency. He kind of reminds me of Joe Thomas a little bit.
Yep. It's a great
in that example. I don't think either one of them was like the most physically dominant guy I've ever watched, but they just 5 years, 6 years, they're just good all the time. They don't miss a lot of time. I mean, until this moment, he doesn't miss a lot of time. But when they're in the game, they're just so consistent. Guys just don't beat him, and Bakhtiari has just been that way. He just doesn't get beat. There's no other way to put it. And, again, he's been a joy to watch. I hope he comes back, but after almost, what is it, a year and 8 months, it's time. It might be time to at least entertain the idea or start looking. I'm sure they've already done it. Okay, is Josh going to be our guy? Because this is kind of where we're at.
Yeah, hopefully he's back sooner rather than later, and hopefully he can recover here. But definitely a level of concern, and I know we're all rooting him on and hoping he can get back sooner rather than later. One more offensive line question for you, because I think this is a fun one. Caleb Jones, offensive tackle, gets elevated to the active roster. 6'9", 370 he's listed at. Now, apparently he's more in like the 330s, maybe 340s at this point, so not exactly at 370 anymore. But that is a mammoth, massive human being along the offensive line. Your thought, not necessarily even on just Caleb Jones. I don't know how much Caleb Jones that you've been able to watch, but a player of that stature being able to play tackle in the NFL and that size, what's sort of a long-term projection there, and what sort of challenges does he face at that size trying to play offensive line in the NFL?
Well, I think the easiest comparison is probably Mekhi Becton for the Jets. When Mekhi Becton came in, we all, I think everybody was just kind of saying, oh my God, I've never seen a guy that's this big that can move that well. And then, some of us that have played the position said, okay, that's great, but that's a lot of weight on those joints. And what inevitably happens with a lot of those guys is, like you just said, he went from 370 to 330, 340. Do you remember in the draft, Evan Neal went from 350, 360 to 334, and everyone looked great. Dude, what is he? He's back at 350 again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens. These guys, the weight fluctuates, and it's not like you and I, we gained 5 pounds, they gained 20 pounds, they gained 30 pounds. And that the constant strain on the joints and everything does take its toll. Injuries happen a little bit faster. Now, if this guy's one of those cats that he does a great job of taking care of himself, keeps his body fat low, joints are healthy, super mobile, has great agility, does all the things that Chris Gizzi and Mark Lobato tell him to do in the weight room, then the longevity of your career and the arc of your development can go a lot faster. But if you don't, with a guy that size, that is the concern. Can they get into position? And I guess the other obvious concern, Andy, is like, if you wanted to pass rush on me, you would use your leverage because you're smaller than I am, right? And if I'm at some point, if I'm too tall and we're about the same size, or at least we have the same power expenditure, like you can unlock your hips and throw somebody my size, it does become a problem at some right. height. I don't know what that height is, but because those guys usually don't bend as well as other people. So the concerns are just, I think the concerns are legitimate as far as being able to have a long career in the league. But then again, there's a guy like John Ogden who could bend, who could play forever, who took a good enough care of himself. I mean, he golfed enough in the offseason that he didn't put on too much muscle. And he could just go out and perform. So you've seen both. I think when a guy is that massive weight-wise, though, that's where I take pause, maybe more so than the height.
Fair enough. We heard it here first. Caleb Jones, next Jonathan Ogden. I think we can all feel safe in assuming that. No, but like, he's a fun player. Maybe they can use him in a couple different, maybe like a big tight end package. Maybe he can be the backup man, Lewis or something. You never know. But fun player. We'll see what he can ultimately become. Quickly, a couple of final things here before we get out of here. Two blowouts week one in a row. Week one, last year against the Saints was abysmal. This year against the Vikings didn't look good. I know you mentioned earlier, clearly not playing in the preseason is a part of that. How much of that is coaching preparedness, or is that just, you got kicked in the mouth week one and you'll bounce back week two and make the corrections?
You probably have to kind of spread the blame, I think, across the organization. Um, the new preseason, listen, the way that everything's handled now with the NFL and the NFLPA, the 17 games, the 3 preseason games, I don't think it's in the best. I don't think any player thinks it's in the best interest of the players. Certainly, the performance on the field. The issue being to the casual fan or the fans they're trying to recruit, they just want the regular season game. The quality is not going to waver enough where most people notice.
Right.
But there is a quality issue, especially in the first week. There always has been, regardless if there's 3 preseason games or 4. You're just kind of making it more obvious now because guys are playing less and less. They're using those joint team practices as their preseason games, and they're not getting that real in-game experience. I think, when you look at the Packers, the lack of violence, the lack of controlled violence by the Packers, and the excessive amount of controlled violence by the Vikings, that points somehow to preparation. Kevin O'Donnell's a first-year coach. Matt LaFleur is now enjoying I believe this is his 4th year. Yep. And there's probably something there. I don't know if they are hitting harder when their full pads are on or when they're shorts and shoulder pads. You don't know if you're not in the locker room every day how they feel. But there was a difference in intensity and a difference in just what's called controlled violence. And I think you have to point to preparation, which is, the coaches have to schedule it and they have to demand it. But the players, it's like we always talk about, an athlete is going to only jump as high as the hurdle you put in front of them. That's how they are designed. If the hurdle is low, they will jump low. If the hurdle is high, they will jump high and get over it. But you have to set that hurdle high. So I think it's a little bit of both players and coaches here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's one of the things I'm definitely going to be this week is what level of intensity and that, controlled violence that you mentioned, do they come out with at home against the Bears, their biggest rival? Hopefully they have a higher level of intensity because listen, this Bears team is talent deficient, but they smashed around with San Francisco in a sloppy environment. Week 1 picked up a win in Chicago that I don't think a lot of people expected them to get. So they're going to be a little bit more pesky than I think people are expecting.
Yeah, I think I watched that game a couple times, and if you're just watching without the scores and everything, just kind of watching play to play, you think San Francisco won the game. Just the way that they kind of controlled the line of scrimmage largely. Listen, the Chicago Bears, though, they've got some fighters, and they are talent deficient, on both sides of the ball. I would expect that under maybe drier conditions, more reasonable conditions, I think Luke Getsy is probably going to open up his offense a little bit more, but you do see multiple tight end sets. You do see the RPO using Justin Fields' legs. I don't know if that's going to turn into more of a passing RPO instead of just like an option look when they have kind of a better field conditions. I think as long as we have the talent we have on our defense, if they show up the communication on the back end and we kind of put ourselves in a little bit better situations to be successful on the front end, I don't think you look at any matchup from our defensive standpoint and go, yeah, I'm concerned about this at all. I think I think flat out, quite frankly, we should dominate every matchup that there is on the board. Offensively, look, I've always thought that Robert Quinn was a very, very unique talent in this league. He certainly proved it last year. Trent Williams and had a good battle, obviously, last week. Trent Williams is the best tackle in the league right now. But Robert got him a handful of times. Trent is allowed to hold way more than anybody else in the league, so it's almost kind of difficult to watch sometimes if you're taking on if you're grading the tape. They have another young player that came up with a sack and a half last week. Roquan Smith had half a sack and showed up with I think 9 or 10 tackles. He's always going to be able to make some plays. But I look at that secondary. They're starting some. They have I think they're starting to play in 2 rookies in their nickel formation. We should be able. This is kind of like get healthy week as far as if you just look at it on paper. I know that there's more that goes into it because there's Chicago versus Green Bay. But if you're just looking at this game on paper with the mismatches we have, if there's ever an opportunity to get healthy, you would think it'd be at 7:20 p.m. on Sunday night.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the interesting thing about this Bears team, we're coming off of a Bears regime that I don't think, and I think some of these are fairly obvious, but didn't always have the best talent evaluation. I don't know, maybe taking Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes and a couple other moves. Some of their defensive moves specifically, Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon, Dominique Robinson, who you mentioned, I think, like you said, had a sack and a half. Even finding guys like a Jack Sanborn as an undrafted free agent who's filling a special teams role for them. I'm a little bit concerned they may have a little bit of a better talent evaluation moving forward. It's going to be a while before we see, what they can do. And if Justin Fields is the guy, and if they need to go and rebuild an entire new offense with a new quarterback, that'll take some time. But overall, new GM so far has found a couple diamonds in the rough for them.
Yeah, and I actually like the Muhammad pickup from Indianapolis. I watched him the last couple of years. I think he's a good player. Again, field conditions last week just kind of make this a tough game to evaluate. It's almost tough to go back and watch preseason games because you're not going to get a lot of action. If you get a lot of action from the side you want to watch, they might be playing against second stringers, and you just never know how that's really going to look. But I think you're right. I think the offensive line on this team, I'm excited to see, particularly their left tackle. I'm excited to see Preston and maybe Rashawn Gary go over there, get his hips turned early in his set, and then be able to press him and press the pocket on Justin Fields and make Justin Fields uncomfortable early. One thing that we saw last week, I think in the first series, they had a meeting with the quarterback twice, and you can see with a young quarterback getting him off the spot. The first play of the game, I think the left guard got beat, and he kind of threw a floater pass that could have been disastrous as well. So I think the key to one of the keys to this game is going to be, can we get him off the spot early? Can we make him uncomfortable? And listen, I don't think running the RPO I don't think we're as concerned about his legs as the Packers should be concerned that the light switch goes on in the middle of the game and he goes, oh man, I forgot how good I am. Because if you watch him in college, you watch some of the stuff that he can do physically, you watch some of the throws that he did make, like he's got a lot of talent. Yeah. It's just a question of being able to put it all together. We just don't want to put it together, at least for a couple more years.
Yeah, Packers defensive front has to be the breadwinner here because this Bears offensive line not very good. Justin Fields is one of the longest times to throw in the NFL over last year in week one this year so far. So Green Bay's got to take advantage of that. We saw in that 49ers game, right? You give him a little bit of extra time to buy out, roll out, and he hits. Who did he hit on the right side for the? Was it Pettis that he hits on the touchdown?
One catch, 51 yards or something like that in touchdown. Yeah.
Exactly. You allow him to have that time in the pocket, bounce around, and you never know what's going to happen. So Green Bay's defensive front has to be super active. They've got to contain him inside the pocket. And if they do that, they should have a ton of opportunities for success. Last question. One thing you'd like to see from this Packers team overall as they try to bounce back from a tough week one loss?
I'm old school, man. I want to see him play a more physical game. Braxton Jones is the left tackle I was talking about, number 70. Like he's a rookie. We're kind of in that same situation. He's a rookie. I don't even think he's a high pick.
5th round.
And that doesn't mean anything. Don't get me wrong. But I guess the expectation is when you draft somebody in the first round, you kind of go, yeah, but they think he's game ready. I don't know if they necessarily felt that way about this player. Lucas Patrick was rotating with is that Taven Jenkins?
Tevin Jenkins
at right guard. Right? Yeah, they rotated. And listen, if Kenny Clark gets to play against Lucas Patrick, then in my mind, that is an opportunity for a bull rush 100 out of 100 times, right? Getting off the ball. And I'd just like to see that explosive, anticipating the snap count, all of that kind of stuff that comes along with like a second-year quarterback that is in a little bit of a more vanilla offense, where they don't have a weapon outside like Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen that we really have to worry about, and we can kind of pin our ears back and let's go get this guy and make this kind of a slobber knocker game a little bit.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think, watching the trenches early in this game is going to tell a lot. That physical brand of football. No reason that the group of Kenny Clark, Jerron Reed, Dean Lowry, Preston Smith, and Rashawn Gary can't win against this, front. Like you said, 5th round pick Braxton Jones. On the other side, it's 5th round pick from last year, Larry Borum. Lucas Patrick's rotating in. Tevin Jenkins is really making the first starts of his career. Cody Whitehair is solid, but that's it. This is a matchup that Green Bay's got to win. On the other side, they got to figure out a way to be more physical, run the ball. Like you said, win their double teams. If they can do that, if you're seeing a bigger improvement from the trenches than what we saw against Minnesota, I think Green Bay's going to be set up for success throughout the course of this game. Mike, amazing stuff as always. So excited to do this with you all season long. Tell us again where we can follow you, what you're working on, your other podcasts, etc.
Yeah, Mon Green and I are still doing the On My Block podcast every week. We're actually going to do a preview here later on today of this game. You can hit me up on Twitter at Mike Wahle 68 or Process to Perform on Instagram. Andy, thank you as always for having me, man. Look forward to working with you all year.
Can't wait. We will see you again next Friday right here on YouTube. For those of you who have not subscribed yet, I don't know what more you want. We got Mike Wahle every Friday. We've got a ton of fun stuff going on. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.